plenary session on Latin America, Australia, New Zealand, Latin American links. Thank you for being with us today. We have an excellent group of panelists. I'm going to introduce one by one before they start talking. But before, I would like to say thank you, LASA, for providing us the opportunity to be here all together today. Thank you, Raul Sanchez. Thank you, Margarita Lopez Maya, and all the team of LASA and all the team of La Trobe University, who have done an excellent job to bring all of you and all the people online with us in the last 3 days. We have also recognized Tatiana. Tatiana is with us today too, not participating, but as an observer. Tatiana is the chair of GRULAC and is the honorary consul of Ecuador. Thank you for being with us, Tatiana. And I would like to briefly say that we have also to keep in mind as someone who has been an icon of the Latin American studies, Professor Bobby Carr, who in the last 3 weeks has been very sick, fighting between life and death. Then our hearts also go to Professor Bobby Carr. We are going to start our session with Professor Betty Lee, who is a professor emeritus at La Trobe University, a visiting fellow at Boston College Center for International Higher Education, and the chair of PALA, obviously. We have a heavy hitter here. Is the Council of Australia and Latin American Relations. She's an internationally renowned researcher and educator, recognized globally for her leadership in the internationalization of higher education, and in particular, internationalization of the curriculum. She's currently working on projects in universities in Brazil, Chile, Peru, and Mexico. Thank you, Professor Lee. I have to, every speaker will have 5 minutes because the idea was to have a very robust discussion and audience discussion at the end of the presentation. Professor Lick, the room is yours.
I'm unmuted now. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much to the organisers as well for the opportunity to participate. It's fabulous. I'm going to share my screen. I just have a few slides, and we'll get started because this is we have very little time. I'm having a problem with getting the slideshow up, which I didn't have before. Just hold on a second. Now you can see that? Can you see the slides? Yes, good. I'm going to try to get them from... Anyway, I'll leave the notes here. I'll leave this on the side because every time I go out of that, I lose the slide. So let me just say that I'm speaking to you today from Adelaide, which is my hometown. Although I'm an emeritus professor at La Trobe University, I do live in Adelaide, and I do want to pay respects to the traditional and original owners of the land on which I sit today, the Kaurna people, and their elders past, present, and emerging. Today, I'm fascinated by this theme. I'm really thrilled to be here because I think it's such an important topic. My focus, though, in the next 5 minutes is going to be on realising the potential of Latin America relations with a focus on encounters and connections in international education, including my own research area, just outlined for you, which is really about the internationalisation of higher education for all students and for society, within which student mobility is one small part. We'll get to that a little bit later, but also more broadly with reference to the work of Koala. It's been my absolute honour to be and pleasure to be the chair of Koala for the last 18 months, since February 2024. It's a long-term commitment of the Australian government to strengthen linkages between Australia and the LATAM region across a number of areas through business, institutional and people-to-people interactions and sharing of knowledge of shared benefit, dealing with shared issues. We direct our efforts and resources, supported by 7 expert directors. I think Erin Watson has also been with you in Melbourne with ALELD, the group that she's done a lot of work with. We have an annual grant program, and we have these 5 priority areas. I'm not going to read them out. I'm assuming that you can look at those carefully and just note there's the breadth of those and the potential depth. We found that the koala is really, in the words of the minister, it plays an important role in the Australian government's foreign policy beyond the reach of traditional diplomacy. So we're working in a very different way, and we're working often on practical application of knowledge and research and experiences. I've got 3 key messages today. One, about the topic more broadly. One is that engagement between Australia and Latin America is already significant, it's ongoing, and it's across a range of areas of shared interest. Trade in education and research collaboration are very significant parts of the success story to date. I think some things could change in the future. We could strengthen and deepen. It's a positive outlook, but I do believe we need to rebuild our social license to operate in international education in Australia in particular. And I'll talk just very briefly about that and hope we can have a further discussion after other presenters have put forward their perspectives. So just to expand on each one of those a little more, there's evidence of significant ongoing engagement across areas of shared interest. The directors on the board are very busy. I'm very busy. We're all engaged in different ways across those priority areas. So we've had Mara Bunn, for example, in Belém this week at the COP meeting. She's one of our directors. You can see who all the directors are online. We funded 8 grant initiatives from $10,000 to $50,000 Australian in 2024-25. You can find the details of those grants and previous grants on the website. But Koala is just one of the groups working intensely in the region. There's ALELD that you know well, I'm sure, ALABAC without the A, and OSMINE, as well as others. So there's much work that we can build on to realise the potential. And increasingly and always, I think, we need to be working together, seeking out partners in Latin America with like minds and looking for looking to deal with complex problems. I'm not going to go through this list of projects, but just quickly highlight the fact that they are quite very broad, and you can see the different sorts of focus across those areas, and there are more details, as I said, on the website. The second key message is that trade in education and research collaboration have been very significant parts of the success story in Australia-Latin America relations to date. And a few facts, more information on these is available on government websites, and I've put some links in a slide at the bottom here for you to have a look at it later time if you're interested. But we see that Colombia and Brazil are in our top 10 markets for international students coming to Australia, followed by Chile 23rd and Mexico 34th. So we've got a good, strong number of students, young people, older people coming backwards and forwards across to Australia. Research partnerships, also very important. LATAM countries, all in our top 50 out of 300 international research partners, when we measure this by the number of joint publications. And you can see Brazil there, 15th for joint publications. And these are all Chile, Mexico, Colombia. These are all in the top 50. It's incredible. Top areas of research collaboration are agricultural and biological science, earth and planetary sciences, medicine, physics, astronomy. And because of this, and perhaps as part of this, Latin Americans are now one of the fastest growing diasporas in Australia. What an amazing group of people to drive this further, to drive these linkages further, and to engage more, and to engage the Australian community so that they come to understand, along with government, at a time when Australia's focus is on the ASEAN region. If we can build these relationships and understanding of the importance of relationships between Latin America and Australia, we are going to have to work hard in the next few years, even though what we've achieved has been fantastic to date. And my view in relation to the social license to operate in international education is that it's absolutely critical. I think we've, in international education in particular, we've lost, we take this term social license from the mining sector. And what it means is how we respond to society's needs through the work that we do. And mining companies have become very good at engaging with their communities. Sometimes they have had some spectacular mistakes, but they've actually worked very hard to build their social license. So we need to do that in international education. And we can do that, I think, if we focus on the quality of education outcomes for more students, all students, and for the communities who support them, both in Australia and in Latin America. This means we'll have to do some new things while maintaining the best of what we currently do. We need to move away, I think, from almost a primary focus in international education in Australia on trade and a kind of one-way mobility between Latin America and Australia. The majority of that mobility being towards Australia. We need to be sending more students to Latin America, and we also need to be thinking about how we bring the benefits of international education to the broader community, both here in Australia and in Latin America. And I could talk about that all day, but I'll leave that for a question if someone would like to know more. We also need to continue to work with government and industry partners in both Australia and Latin America to expand our horizon as well, to engage more young leaders in Australia and Latin America through such organisations as ALELD, but also thinking more broadly about how we engage the next generation to carry on the work that's already been started. And I do believe my 5 minutes is up.
Oh, yes. Yes. Professor Leslie, thank you very much. We are going to have questions and discussion at the end of the sessions. And now, like in one of those Netflix series that you mentioned the casting after the beginning of the program. I did not introduce myself. My name is Victor Del Rio. I'm a senior fellow, industry fellow at the RMIT. And I've been with many of the people in this panel working towards improving the relationships between Latin America, New Zealand, and this is something other, and Australia. Okay, coming back to our presenters, we have as a second presenter the Honorable Telmo Languiller, former Speaker of the Parliament of Victoria, probably the highest political position that Latin America has had ever in this country. He's an honorary professional fellow advisor, Pando Science and Technology Park in PCTP, Uruguay, adjunct professor of the RMIT University, and a good friend. Then, Telmo?
Thank you, Victor. And am I on? Yeah. For the purpose of complying with requirements, I propose to read my presentation. First of all, let me say that this is a document that we have prepared with my friend and colleague Pablo Cousiño from the University of Chile, one of the incidentally young Latin Americans recently arrived, and it's a pleasure for me to work with a young academic, given that I'm not an academic. May we pay respects to elders past and present and extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. And may we commend the indigenous communities of Victoria and the state government for giving passage to the legislation on treaty. May I say, if I may indulge for a second, Barry Carr, a seasoned scholar, a seasoned diplomat, a champion of the Latin America-Australia relationships, we wish you all the best. Let me put to you the following. The paper outlines the growing strategic importance of Victoria's relationship with Mercosur bloc, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay, with Venezuela currently suspended for failing to meet democratic and regulatory standards. We highlight Latin American significant diversity and the broad range of opportunities and challenges it presents. Our argument centers on the idea that deeper engagement with Mercosur, particularly Uruguay, offers substantial benefits for Victoria and Australia, not only in trade, but also in education, research, innovation, sustainability, and indeed global influence. Our text proposes that this opportunity could be strengthened through a comprehensive DFAT white paper on Latin America, which would guide a more coordinated approach across government, universities, civil society, while demonstrating Australia's long-term commitment to the region, or alternatively, an inquiry, as Minister Don Farrell announced, on Africa. I will skip the history of Australia, Latin America, for a number of reasons, including that I'm old enough to have experienced most of it. But I want to bring to the attention, particularly, if I may, those that haven't been in this space for that period of time, to remember that in '89 we established ALABAC, the Australian Latin American Council, and I commend all the chairs and presidents and boards over many years for championing a relationship which was quite complex and, may I say, challenging. I encourage each and every one who hasn't to read the 1992 report from the Senate Committee on Defense and Trade and Foreign Affairs, an important report that gave birth, amongst other initiatives, to COALAR, the Council on Latin America Relations, and I commend the current chair and previous chairs for an amazing job they have done. I will skip history and go straight to why Victoria could play a significant role under the globally connected strategy. And as you would be aware, the state of Victoria is the one and only state that has a comprehensive strategy that sits alone for the purpose of the relationship with Latin America, called the Globally Connected Strategy, which in government, I was in government at the time, had the privilege to work with the now Premier Jacinta Allen and the then Treasurer John Brumby on the actual globally connected strategy for Latin America. And it included and continues to include trade, investment, international education, innovation, and partnerships. Let me put to you the case for a stronger relationship between Mercosur and Australia. Why Mercosur and why Uruguay in particular? Nothing to do with the fact that I'm from Uruguay, but may I say, I actually do believe in the significance of opening new relationships and opening an Atlantic coast type of strategy, particularly for the state government. Mercosur's scale, natural resources, and industrial capability complement Victoria's strengths in advanced services, education, technology, and sustainability. As of 2024, the combined population of the organization's member countries is approximately 280 million. Australia's population is 26.7. In addition, the combined nominal gross domestic product, GDP, is approximately $3.3 trillion, and conversely, Australia in USD nominal terms is $1.7 trillion. Therefore, a deeper partnership between Victoria and Mercosur would create major mutual benefits by strengthening the collective influence, global forums, and enhancing trade and supply chain resilience through the integration of Victoria's technological strengths with Mercosur's agri-food and industrial capacity. Collaboration in clean energy and agricultural research, as it has been highlighted, would support sustainability, climate resilience, and food security, while expanded student mobility and research links would drive innovation across sectors, including biotechnology, engineering, health, digital technology. Let me go to important points that we can debate later. But importantly, a relationship of the kind would provide global influence. Joint engagements amplify the shared voice of Victoria and Mercosur through the typical forums of G20, WTO, climate and food security forums. Not to forget the Cairns Group, which remains an important multilateral body for Australia and indeed the region. Trade, supply chain resilience, energy transition, sustainability, food and climate security, innovation and talent. And finally, let me stress the following. Victoria should adopt, and I'm in the process of having these discussions with a number of ministers in the state government and indeed parliamentary friends and colleagues in Canberra. Victoria should adopt a strategic engagement policy with Mercosur, coordinated across trade, education, research, and sustainability initiatives. The federal government should pursue a white paper roadmap on Latin America. Initially, this could have the same format as the inquiry into strengthening Australia's trade and investment relations with Africa, recently announced by the Federal Minister, Don Farrell. There are key actions that I will put to the forum if interested later. Let me say that this is a pivotal moment to deepen Victoria-Mercosur engagement with a clear strategy, sustained commitment from government, industry, academia, and indeed strengthened people-to-people links. Victoria can continue to build and to lead in building a resilient, innovative, and sustainable partnership with South America. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, guests and panelists.
Thank you. Our third speaker is Caroline Arnett. Caroline is the Director of International Education and Study in Melbourne in the Victorian Government, supporting education providers and businesses to engage globally and maintaining Victoria's position as a destination of choice for international students. Caroline has worked in policy, advisory, and analytical roles in relation to the Australian education sector for almost 2 decades at the national and state government level. Welcome, Caroline.
Thank you very much, and lovely to be here today with you all. And I too would like to associate myself with the acknowledgement of country. Pay my respects to the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, their elders, past, present, and emerging, and of course this amazing panel that I have the great privilege of being on as well. And I feel like this is a timely discussion. I think it's the 50-year anniversary of bilateral relations between Colombia and Australia, and 80-year celebration between Chile and Brazil. So great timing to have this conference. So I'm just going to take you a little bit through about Study Melbourne and the work that we do and our engagement with Latin America. So next slide. So we, as outlined in the intro, so we promote Melbourne and Victoria as a study destination to international students. We also promote Victoria and our education providers as partners of choice as well. So picking up a little bit on what Betty mentioned, but partners that we deliver support providers with their transnational education operations as well. We make sure international students have an excellent experience here in Victoria through a range of different student programs and support services, which I'll touch on in a moment. As the last point says, we support education providers to go global. Next slide, please. So Melbourne, I'm not sure how many people are from Melbourne or have flown in. Sorry about the hay fever. But we are consistently ranked as best student city in Australia and 5th best in the world, which is a rank we're really, really proud of. Sydney is hot on our heels, but we have led that position for around 15 years now. most livable city, and we are Australia's cultural and sports capital. We know that we're the only city in the world to have a Formula One Grand Prix and an Australian Tennis Open as well. So really privileged in that way, and the MCG right in the city. So great place for students to come here and study, but also live and have a great experience while they're studying. So next slide. So we have our Study Melbourne hub. So it's located on 17 Hardware Lane, which is right in the heart of the city. It's where there are a lot of private providers based. We do also support university students. University students tend to have their own really great supports and programs. We do also support university students, but private providers as well, which is why we're located there. We provide free and confidential support for students, so that includes casework through our team of qualified social workers. We know that students sometimes need a little bit of extra help to get back on their student journey. We do see a lot of Colombian students come through the hub, although that is changing at the moment. But we do support, a number of students from across Latin America. We also do really fun things as well, like we have a fiesta celebrating the Latin American cultures, which is really fun. As well as supporting students when they need it. We have a free legal service, so around accommodation and employment. They're the two key areas international students tend to need support in. And that's not just providing advice to students, it's also supporting them through to court. So we've supported a number of students to reclaim lost wages, get bonds back, all that type of thing as well. We also do a range of career development activities. So really thinking about how can we support students get the skills they need to get their job, but also really importantly, working with employers, because we're trying to break down the barriers in the minds of employers around improving, around hiring international students. People in the room who have heard me talk about this before, but that's a real passion project for me, because I think we have this amazing talent pool here. We just need to tap into it, and we really want to make sure that students get that return on investment while they're studying in Australia. Next slide. So just a quick overview of the ecosystem.
1 minute.
In Victoria. I will skip over this and leave this for everyone to read in their own time. Next slide, because I want to get to our engagement. So Latin America is a key region for us. It's a real diversification region for Victoria. We mainly have Indian students, Chinese students, and Southeast Asian students. So we're really keen to see our students from Latin America grow. That's student recruitment, joint research, co-publications, scholarly exchanges, etc. We have around 27,000 students from Latin America, mostly Colombia and Brazil, which Betty mentioned. We have students mostly in ELICOS and VET, but we've seen a real strong growth in higher education, especially through the big scholarship programs that are available in Colombia and Brazil. So we have strong programs with Colpaturo, ICETEX, FUNED, FIDER, Pronabec in Peru as well, and ANIT in Chile. So the scholarship bodies are a really great pipeline of students coming to Victoria. And many of the Victorian universities have agreements with those scholarship bodies. But Latin American students, they make a really valuable contribution to the diversity and vibrancy of Victoria's communities, as well as our classrooms and campuses. And they share, and Latin America generally, Betty mentioned as well, shares many of our common priorities that Victoria has around biodiversity, tropical diseases, clean energy, fintech, education. There's lots of common areas and common ground for us to do joint research and collaborations with. And a lot of those research collaborations and international students here are really foundational for our bilateral engagement with Latin America. Many alumni return back to Latin America, and they might start a business and then they might invest in Victoria, or a Latin American student starts a business here and then exports back home. There's lots of great work there. We have government representatives as well, really championing Victoria, but also Latin America. So it really helps, that alumni engagement really helps strengthen that engagement. We have student associations that are emerging as well, and that's really important as well, to welcome incoming students and make sure that they have a great, easier entry into Victoria. So I could go through those, but I think I'm probably out of time. But just to note on a last note that the Victorian government has 23 offices all around the world, including offices in Latin America. So we have a team in Santiago, And we also have an education services consultant in Colombia, specifically really supporting and furthering our engagement with Colombia. So Victorian government's very invested in Latin America, and something we're really keen to grow and build as well.
Thank you, Caroline. Our next speaker is Matthew Marr. He is the Principal Advisor, International Research for Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand, where he is designing its international research strategy. Before that, he was Director of the Latin America Center of Asia Pacific Excellence, based at the university, and in previous roles, he was New Zealand's first education counselor for Latin America and the President of the Latin American New Zealand Business Council. Welcome. Matthew.
Gracias. Kia ora, everyone. Ko Matthew o Mā tōku ingoa. I'm, as I've spoken briefly in Māori then, I'm from the other Victoria, University of Wellington, over, the wind blew me over. But it's great to be here. It's lovely to be back in La Trobe again, because I was here with Barry Carr 28 years ago doing an LASA conference at La Trobe. So please send my regards to him. I'm going to speak briefly about a couple of things. It's a good news, bad news, still good news story. The good news part was that about the 7 years, I looked after what was called the Latin America Center of Asia Pacific Excellence, which is a bit of a mouthful, so we called it the LATAM Cape. This was a really well-funded and extremely privileged organization to lead. It was the creation of a Minister of Finance who'd been to Latin America and saw the potential there for New Zealanders to get to know it more, New Zealanders to benefit from that increased engagement. It's one of Latin America. If you're from Brazil, you probably don't consider yourself part of the Asia Pacific, but generally it got lumped in with the North Asia and Southeast Asia Centre to become 3 centres of Asia Pacific excellence. And we had a really broad brief from school kids to students to exporters. We had to design programs to meet them all and still be coherent. It was a national mission, and it was backed by 4 universities. So it wasn't your traditional area studies centre at a university, and it wasn't just one university. It had a really unusual brief. And we did a lot in our 7 years. We did do some student mobility programs, and I echo the previous panelist's comment about that. But we also did capacity building courses for businesses, transferring knowledge from academia. We started with the presumption that most New Zealanders don't think about Latin America. It's off their radar. I even call it Pluto for some of them. It's not that they've got negative attitudes, they have no attitudes. And so we have to put it on the horizon. So we came up with all sorts of experiments like digital tools, an app, all sorts of things. We also had conversations, bringing the stakeholders together. And by stakeholders, I mean students, I meant right-wing business people, left-wing student radicals, brought them all in the same room to talk to each other. We also had a few conference presentations like this. But you'll note 2024, we're not in 2024, it's 2025. It was a previous government's initiative. So when a new government came in, they said, oh, we'll take that money. And so the centre, which relied on that public money, closed down. So we're in New Zealand Latin American relations without the Cape. Well, the current government really emphasises face-to-face diplomacy. They place a great deal on ministers going out. They accuse the previous government of sitting at home. But Latin America, I would say, is not central to their vision. They're really focused on geopolitics, which means China and the Pacific. And when they think of export diversification, they think of India and Southeast Asia. They even cancelled a universally acclaimed scholarship program, Prime Minister's scholarship program, not only to Latin America, but also to Asia. At the very same time, they were saying we need to get close to Southeast Asia. So some shall we say, policy balkanisation there. So that's the bad news story. But the government, in fairness to it, is still engaging New Zealand government with Latin America on many trade policy innovations. You can look up those acronyms if you like. I don't have time to go through them, but they're all about basically trying New Zealand and similar small countries who believe in free trade to try and keep the conversations going while global rules are under assault. There's still the ongoing presence of business councils. I used to lead the Latin American New Zealand Business Council, as you heard. It remains active, and there's also a new New Zealand Brazil Business Chamber. And there's even a new flight link. One thing that we have got advantage of over you in Australia is we're closer to Latin America. Yes. And so we need to use that proximity. So there is a new flight, quote unquote, the world's longest direct flight going from Shanghai to Auckland to Buenos Aires. And it's the fulfillment of what we used to call the Southern Route. Now, but two legacies. Before the Cape left, it did two things, and one of them is bearing fruit, and I'm here today so the other one can bear fruit. If you are one of the lucky people who heard our presentation, our panel at 8 o'clock yesterday morning, session 30, roundtable 31, you'll have heard me talking about this. I don't think many of you were, so listen to it when the recording comes out, because it's a really exciting story. Just before the Cape closed, we spent a lot of time working with Universities New Zealand, the body which joins all 8 New Zealand universities together, to take them to Latin America at a senior level to show them that. And so we went to Brazil and 5 other countries. And out of it, we formed an unexpected friendship and a growing bond with the State University sector in Paraná State in Brazil. And so we've had reciprocal missions. There's a focus on, I'll fix the typo, and Indigenous themes, on innovation and sustainability, and we're trying to build a long-term relationship. So listen to that recording when it comes out. We call it Kiwis Meet Capybaras. And for those who like cute animals, this ticks both boxes. I don't know how the nocturnal and the diurnal animal ever meet, but that's okay. The other thing that I'm here to talk about is this report. I've brought 6 copies along. One has already been nabbed by one of my fellow panelists. So there are 5 of these copies to go, but I can send you soft copies. We did a report at the end on how New Zealand and Australia could collaborate to engage with Latin America more. And why should they? In what areas? And what stops them? And so the report focuses, and if you don't pick up one of the physical copies, I can send you a soft copy. We focus on what are the common values uniting New Zealand and Latin America in their approach to Latin America, and Latin Americans in their approach to New Zealand. And it really comes down to, what interests people who aren't used to looking at each other. What makes them do so? And so it's a case of emphasising what unites everyone, and they are to try and find stable partners in an unpredictable world. They are to promote rules and trade and dialogue. Latin America is a niche opportunity for New Zealanders, and I would argue for Australia as well. The big difference between Australia and New Zealand is, of course, yes, we're closer, but you have mining, you have many more Latin Americans migrants, you have many more Latin American students. So these make a difference. So we're not the same, but we could still do work together, given the common interests that we have. And another area that we could collaborate on is the idea of working with our Pacific Island neighbours, because they're the focus of increasing attention. The Pacific is important to both New Zealand and Australia, but it doesn't have the capacity to engage with everyone who's suddenly interested in it. So we could together be channels for New Zealand, for Latin American engagement with the South Pacific or the Blue Pacific continent in ways which don't strain that region's resources and meet everyone's needs. If you want to see more of this report, obviously read it. There's also a video of it, which is in the link there, which you might get. We launched the 2 reports together with people from the Australian Embassy, academics, etc., etc. Well, that's it from me from now, but I look forward to taking your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We have our next speaker is Ambassador Arturo Cabrera Hidalgo. He's an Ecuadorian scholar and diplomat, currently serving as an honorary professor at the Australian Catholic University. He holds a master's degree in public administration from Harvard University, a PhD in international cooperation in security and intelligence from Leiden University, and a Juris Doctor from the Catholic University of Ecuador. Over his diplomatic career, he has served as Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Acting Foreign Minister, Under Secretary General for Intelligence of Ecuador, and Ambassador Deputy Permanent Representative to the United Nations. His academic work spans more than 2 decades, focusing on the intersection of international law, security policy, and regional cooperation, with a particular emphasis on Latin America's strategic role in global affairs. Welcome, Ambassador.
Muchas gracias. Good morning, and thank you, Victor, for the kind presentation. Thank you, Raul, and the organizers for the invitation to participate in LASA 2025. It's really a privilege to be a guest speaker today with these distinguished participants. When I presented credentials in Wellington, New Zealand, as new Ecuadorian ambassador, I emphasized that my country, Ecuador and New Zealand, were and are united by the same ocean, the same needs, the same problems, and the same hopes. However, when presenting credentials to the Australian Governor General, at that time it was the Honorable David Hurley, I was not so diplomatic. It was not intentional. It came naturally out of my heart. He actually surprised me. It was when we were walking to the credentials room. He suddenly asked me, how are the relations between Australia and Ecuador? And I just responded, well, we are in front of each other, but we are not looking at each other. I thought I started with the wrong foot my mission in Australia. But he actually liked it. And he remembered those words. Later on, during a formal event on Remembrance Day, when all the ambassadors were just supposed to greet hands with him and the Prime Minister, he stopped and smiled and asked me, are we already looking at each other? I answered, we're working on it. And we are. We're working on that. The academia, the university is providing knowledge to inform public policies in that direction. So this is also what we are doing here today in this LASA conference. In the inaugural session, Professor Margarita Lopez Maya, LASA president, talked about paradigms that are shifting in international relations. What I boldly said to the Governor General is in very simple words, what we believe is the status quo of the relation between our states and our regions on both sides of the Pacific. And this is a paradigm that needs to be broken. A paradigm in the traditional sense as it was presented by Kuhn since the 1960s. Karl Popper and others may have differed with Kuhn in different elements of academic and philosophical reasoning, but I have not found discrepancies, especially among those who apply social psychology to international relations, in the fact that a paradigm shift can result from the accumulation of evidence that challenges the status quo, and that the only way to break a paradigm is by replacing it with a new one. In the current world, the current world order. And with all the existing and growing information and evidence about this status quo, and at the same time increasing uncertainty, which should be the new paradigm that we, as countries of the Pacific, East and West Pacific, with emphasis in the South Pacific, need to propose in order to challenge and change the status quo, in order to start paying attention to what is in front of each other and what we don't see, despite the great potential that doing so has for the future of the Pacific. Considering that at the same time, the Pacific is the future. So, what should be a new paradigm? I think that is the central question for our discussion today, departing from the status quo, evidence, and the analysis of our foreign policies, and especially of our common foreign policy. I will not propose an answer, at least I will not suggest a specific proposal of a new paradigm. Even for non-constructivists, this is necessarily a common and shared construction exercise that has to be done in a framework of a wide discussion, of a wide dialogue. But I think there are many elements that we can discuss and analyze so a new paradigm can be built and can rule the international relations and foreign policies in the Pacific. Some people may consider that the reason for being in front of each other and not looking at each other is distance, but that's just another paradigm. There will be distance as long as we keep our agendas apart, as long as we do not recognize common and shared problems and interests, even common foreign policies, as I mentioned before, which are completely evident in the multilateral world, but not at the regional or bilateral level. Now, even from the geographical point of view, between Santiago and Melbourne, as an example, there is a distance of 11,300 kilometers, not miles. That's an 11, 12 hours flight. From Melbourne to London, you double that time. It takes 23 hours or 18 hours from Perth in a direct flight, but you have to go to Perth first. So the so-called distance is just lack of connectivity due to the fact that our agendas, political and economic agendas, are apart, and no priority to develop joint policies and agendas is yet visible. What I want to emphasize in any case is the potential of a strong relationship and cooperation based on a political renewed understanding of the mutual benefits of such cooperation, and therefore consistent public policies based on changing current paradigms. And that could be also true for an important part of the rest of Asia Pacific region. Which is the problem then? Political will. And this also has its reasons. It is evident, and it is a fact, that there is lack of political will. As a last example, in the last Australian foreign policy white paper, when I was talking about the Latin American white paper, but the Australian foreign policy white paper, the last one, the 2017 white paper, in 122 pages, the words Latin America are only mentioned 4 times. And I must say, these 4 references do not have any political relevance or are part of any strategic vision. This lack of political will becomes even more serious when dealing with the rest of the Pacific island states of Oceania. What Matthew mentioned, 14 countries. And I hope there will be time to talk about it during Q&A, as this is precisely part of my current research at UC. I'll stop here, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Last speaker, is Dr. Perla Guarnero, is a lecturer in law at the Australian Catholic University Originally trained as a lawyer in Mexico, she came to Australia 12 years ago to pursue a Master's of Law and later completed a PhD examining public policies for the protection of irregular migrants in Mexico at La Trobe University. Her academic work spans human rights, migration, and legal education. Perla is actively involved in women's rights projects, and she also leads teaching and learning initiatives aimed at strengthening the quality of legal education. Today, she joins us in her capacity as a representative of Latin Stories Australia, where she volunteers contributing to policy reviews, grant applications, and broader community initiatives designed to empower the Spanish-speaking community and create a more inclusive opportunities. Welcome, Paula.
Thank you, Victor. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to join the acknowledgement of country, recognizing that this is Wurundjeri land and it was never ceded. I'm here in my capacity as a representative for Latin Stories Australia. I am as it was mentioned before, I volunteer with Latin Stories Australia to help them revise some documents. I proofread some papers, but it's not that why I'm there. That is the skills I can help them with the most. But the reason I joined Latin Stories Australia is because of the beauty of what they do. So what are we? Who we are, Latin Stories Australia? Bibi, if you can help me with that one. So our mission is to celebrate Latin American contributions in Australia and contribute to multiculturalism, well-being, and social cohesion. How this started? 10 years ago, two wonderful women, Trini Abascal and Christy, joined and say, we need to tell our stories. There are so many people, Latin Americans, with beautiful stories that need to be heard. We need, if we don't write those stories, we might miss them. And actually, the first Latin Stories Australia was Victor here presenting, and I was the 100th. So all of these stories is just telling who we are, what brought us here, what are our dreams, what are our hopes, what we left behind, what connects us to our countries of origin, and what connects us now to what we call home now, which is Australia. So that connection with two countries, and that can help other people feel connected and identify with each other. So Latin Stories Australia is a nonprofit organization. Now it's not only about stories. We also do some projects and initiatives that help people feel better in Australia, help people get to know each other, get to know some strategies to be better in Australia, help people fit in, help people be happier here. So it is our Latin Stories. We do some workshops that are called integration. Some of the activities we do is we promote inclusion and increase visibility of the Latin American community in Australia. We also try to generate spaces that strengthen community identity and promote that sense of belonging that is much needed for some people new, or even some people who have been here for decades that still need that feeling of belonging. And we try to improve social well-being, particularly for those who need help. The way we do, we're a non-for-profit organization, so we rely on donations. We apply for grants. We get some good support from some grants, and we have helped more than 5,000 participants. We have had more than 5,000 participants in our workshops, not only Latin Americans. Our workshops are targeted at everyone who would like to come and join us and get to know Latin American culture as well, but Latin Americans who want to know Australian culture. We have visibility of more than 300 inspiring stories, and we have also provided with some food vouchers to people. So some students who are in need. And when I was listening to you, Caroline, of all of the things that the Student Melbourne Hub does, we try to do something as well. So students from Latin America, sometimes that's the first point of contact. It could be language, perhaps, saying, when I'm in distress, I just want to pursue help in my own language. But it's good to know that there are so many other areas that we could direct students to. So this is what we do. I am here just giving the other perspective, the perspective from the non-for-profit, the group born from a group of people. We rely on volunteer work. We are many volunteers, people who come to Australia saying, I want to take part in the workshops, and then they say, can I help you? All hands are welcome. And I'm just very happy to be able to contribute to such a beautiful organization and to continue helping our Latin American people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move to our next session. This is a debate. I'm going to abandon my hat, academic hat. I'm going to put my journalist hat. I would choose to be a journalist, a foreign correspondent. And in order to do that, I'm not going to say what a great job we have done. I'm going to address the elephant in the room. I'm going to start with Kuala. It's fresh air that we have Betty as the new director of Kuala. But the reality is that Kuala, among all the people who are working in Latin America, had a big elephant in the room. And there is two elephants in the room. Systemic, what we call systemic issue. One of those issues is that Kuala has spent around $8 million since it was formed, providing grants to a number of projects. But it's going to be very difficult to pinpoint what is the impact of that $8 million. Many people say that the impact is because the tactical approach of Kuala, it means gives money to small little projects that later on have an expiration date, and not having a strategical approach to that, medium or long-term approach. Having the Spanish language, teaching in Australia, for example, that is funny, but it's fundamental to advance the relationships on the Portuguese. The second is the undue influence of the mining companies that really sell pollution to Latin America. Then instead of limiting those negative things from the environmental point of view, we are promoting them. I would like Betty to address these two issues to see whether Kuala is addressing this elephant in the room.
Yeah, here we go. Well, thanks very much for that, Victor. I'm very happy to take those two very curly questions. I have to say I think it's really important that we do address elephants in the room. And so let's start with the first one and the issue of impact. And the need perhaps to be more strategic. That has been a focus of our discussions in the last 2 years since I've been chair. Prior to that, there was a few years where there were no grants. There was a government review of the foundations and councils and institutes, all of them. And importantly, there was a decision to maintain Koala. At that point, they could have not refunded it at all. But I would argue that we are underfunded, but also that sometimes in the impact of projects we are very difficult to measure in the long term. And they require a degree of, especially if they're working at a very individual, small organisation level. So can we measure the impact of a program to empower women with disability in leadership programs in sport, which is one of our programs that we funded last year? Our conversations in our meetings over the next year will be how we not only promote what has happened there, but also encourage the group to continue that work that they have already achieved. So it's very hard with a budget of around $350,000 a year across 5 priority areas to fund big projects. Most people ask for around 50,000, 40 to 50,000. And if we only did 2 of those, would we have more impact? I don't know if we would. We would maybe have deeper impact in a smaller number of areas. So that is one of our problems. One of the problems is the broad range of priority areas too, I think. But that also reflects, I think, a strength, and that is the broad range of interests that we have. And I think we also need to recognise that Koala isn't the only group working in this space, as I think we've mentioned before. So yes, I agree, we always need to be more strategic. I think we are battling some headwinds at the moment in terms of the geopolitical tensions that are focusing Australia's attention in foreign policy in different areas. I absolutely agree with Arturo around the need for a new paradigm of interaction, not just with Ecuador, but with the region. And so I'll leave that for further conversation. Just to pick up your second point, I never thought I would go to a mining conference ever in my life, and I've been to 2 now. I understand the concern around the impact of mining companies, in the negative impacts of mining companies. What we have done is tried to focus all of our attention in any grants, any work that we support on addressing some of those negative issues, but also, for example, training up female leaders in mining companies to take leadership in that sort of space. So that we ran a range of, with the University of Queensland, a range of workshops in and across Latin America, in and across Chile, but also in other parts of Latin America, bringing in women from mining companies who were perhaps on the point of moving up the ladder. And we had discussions around those sorts of the ways to influence and those bigger issues in relation to that sort of thing. So I think there are a number of things that we're trying to do. We're also regularly, we try to meet with Foreign Minister and or the Assistant Foreign Minister, and we're thinking about how we can not only be more strategic with the limited funds that we have, but how we can make the case for more attention on the importance of this relationship with Latin America. We're in a bit of a bubble sometimes. I think we talk to ourselves a lot in any kind of special interest group, and it's important to remember that there are these tensions, these points of irritation that we need to address. So I think I'll leave it there, and maybe there are other people in the room who have some comments they'd like to make.
Well, otherwise, I would like to continue with the question, because I would like to ask at least one question before we move to the audience. Thank you very much for your response. The second one is Telmo. Telmo, we always argue about the lack of funding. Yeah? We don't have funding for Latin America. However, in 2018, the Mexican ambassador Eduardo Peña Heller came with a back of $5 million. Yeah? You were part of that. It was, they were looking for a counterpart. It was $1 million a year, already approved by the government. It would have transformed the relationship between Mexico and Australia in education and in science. Well, you were part of this settlement trying to get the other $1 million. We talked to people in the Victoria government, the Western Australia government, New South Wales, federal government, universities, Alabama, LASA. You mentioned it. We try everyone. There was no political will. Yeah, there is no political will. Then what this strategy is going to do to create that political will, apart from creating a pathway, how are we going to get that political will?
I will succinctly refer to a number of points. Number one, which is in my paper as well, I fully concur with Arturo in that we need to change the paradigm. And sadly, for me particularly, given my engagement over many decades, I have recollection of a debate that I submitted to the Parliament in 2002, where I talked about changing the paradigm, one of competition to one of cooperation and collaboration. And we could expand on that. And I think we gradually and slowly moving in that direction. But I certainly have recollection of walking through with ministers on both sides of the world, with many ministers and many PMs and presidents. And we used to talk predominantly about competition, particularly at WTO level, although we do cooperate in some areas, but I think predominantly and gradually we're changing to a new paradigm of cooperation and collaboration. I want to make the other point in relation to mining. I used to be very skeptical of mining until I started attending on behalf of the Victorian government the International Mining Resources Conference, which should come back to Melbourne incidentally, because Victoria and Melbourne is the capital of mining equipment, technology and services. And I can assure you that particularly Victoria, but the other states as well, to be fair, constantly talk about meeting standards, engagement with community, mining as a solution and not a problem. A lot of the times mining companies are there before the states are in fact in some areas, and I won't refer to any particular country, but I can assure you that I know of many examples where mining corporations arrived in towns and villages and there was no precedence of the state of that particular nation. Namely, there was no health services, there was no education, and much of that is what Victoria predominantly in the world, but Australia argues must be done. So I think we can and we have changed that paradigm in the main. I won't discredit the big boys and girls in town when they go into Latin American countries and they do things as Victor has suggested. In terms of funding, I was incidentally speaking to a couple of friends and colleagues in the federal parliament yesterday. I think the funding to COALAR is simply shameful. I said it before and I can put this on record. I think a lot more should be done in relation to funding across the board in relation to or with respect to organizations, whether they be in civil society or others that actually help underpin the relationship between us and Latin America and Caribbean nations. My instinct, as I was saying to you, Victor, when I first came in, I'm a political activist, so I come into these conversations as a political activist. So I spend a lot of my time now going around the backbench in the Labor government federally, speaking to them about Latin America and why we should do more, and arguing the case, not just for Mercosur and Uruguay, incidentally, because I was engaged in arguing the case for Santiago, Chile, and Mexico. But I think all of you and all of us should talk more to the federal and particularly local members, should encourage ourselves to talk to ministers. So we should not leave the organizations such as ALABAX and COALARs by themselves. I know that some of you will be cynical about this, but let me assure you that federal members, particularly in the House of Reps, and especially marginal seats, do listen to their constituents. I used to do a lot of listening at the time, and I can only tell you, much more of that political lobbying should be. The proposal that I advanced today, therefore, the inquiry, whether it be carried out by the Committee of Defense and Trade and Foreign Affairs, or alternatively, a roadmap, potentially white paper on Latin America, whether it be on its own or whether it be a part of a broader agenda of Penny Wong's and the federal government's roadmap. They won't do it just on Latin America. They won't do it just on Africa. They're likely to do a broad roadmap for a number of regions. And within that, I think we should include a very good strategic roadmap for Australia, which would translate into what the other states do. And I'll leave it with you with the following. Yes, we do have lack of resources and funding, but let me remind you that Victoria and then Treasurer Brumby and now Premier Jacinta Allan, but at the time the Minister for Global Victoria, was and remains the first and the only state in the country that has a special particular roadmap and agenda for Latin America and the Caribbean, namely the globally connected strategy, one that everyone in this room should use. So I'll leave it here, short and sharp, but obviously I agree with you, lack of funding. If I may say to you, I argued your case, COALAR case yesterday with two of my colleagues. Much more funding for COALAR among other organizations.
Just to pick up on that, I think you need a political strategy, but you can't just rely on it. When my centre was objectively, everyone loved it, except for the new government. So we tried to do things directly to the new government. We did an event for the minister. He loved the event, said one of the best events I've ever attended. Did it lead to money? No. And so I don't think we can just rely on a political strategy, because I don't actually believe in should. I believe in what is. And if people should be interested but are not interested, well, then we need to work with them in other ways. I also think we need to work on institutions. So that's why one of the last things we did for the Cape was to work with our universities, thinking, well, we're about to disappear. Who can we hand the baton over to? Yes, universities are financially constrained, more in New Zealand than Australia, I would argue. Nevertheless, they're semi-permanent institutions, and we need to develop friends there. That was the entire reason we took people over to Latin America. They came, they saw, they loved, they engaged, they continue to engage. Now we have to realise something from their interest, or it will disappear and Latin America will come back in 5 to 10 years.
Thank you. Caroline, go on next. Obviously, this is an institutional question. It's not a person question. It's not the players again. The question here is that we are the education state. We are trying to bring students to Victoria, to Australia. And there are two major things. One is that from Latin America, they see Australia as a very predatory country that is offering a lot and it gives very little when they come. And when they talk about collaboration, for example, double degree, double certifications, well, we tried to do it in 2012. We double accredited 40 teachers and INACAP. They saw that there was a model of collaboration that was going to affect the economic inflow into Victoria. Then how can we change that attitude? Then we are going to try to bring as many students, giving them as little as possible, without the focusing to collaborate with Latin American countries as partners.
It's a really good question, and it's something that in some ways is almost not unique for Latin American students either. And that's why I touched on some of the work we do around improving the employment outcomes for international students, because students give up their time, their resources, a really, really important time of their lives as well, and their families impacted as well. And if we are going to promote a destination as the best place to come and study, then we need to really work on returning that investment that they're all making, not just financially. So that's where we're trying to do more work around improving those employment outcomes, working with employers, not just employers here either. A lot of students go back to their home countries, so also working with our officers, our trade investment officers around the world, to work with their stakeholders, the chambers and councils, etc., industry partners in country, to actually talk about the amazing credentials of these students who have a global perspective. They're multilingual. If you're a company that is globally engaged, these are the students that you want to be hiring, because they have that experience. And we always talk about the soft skills that employers want to hire in their students, what our international students have, because they come here, they have to problem solve. I mean, the visa system has to be pretty complex visa system, but you know, they have to problem solve that. They have to have really good intuition. The Australian sarcasm is not always easy to get, and there's a lot of interpretation that they have to do around that. So there's all these skills and capabilities that employers really need to be tapping into for our international students. So I think that's a really key part of it. I really agree with what Betty said as well around supporting the student mobility teams in the universities to encourage more students, domestic students, to go over to Latin America too. That two-way collaboration is really, really important, and Australia generally, across lots of different regions, it's a little bit one way at the moment. And I think we really need to give back to countries, or if we're going to improve our Asia capabilities, our Latin American capabilities, and improve what Arturo was saying as well about actually looking at each other, then people won't get that until they go to that place and understand and experience it. So I think that student mobility piece is really important, especially I think as well as we move into this era of managed growth of international students. It's harder and harder for international students to come to the country. The federal government's really clamping down on students coming here, and that's impacted quite significantly Latin American students. Victorian government's been very clear about their views on that managed growth system. It's not something that we support or believe in. International education is our largest services export, but more importantly, it's a big part of our communities and you know, many people here that makes our community much more vibrant. So we I think a lot of work to do around improving that two-way collaboration and those joint degrees as well. And I remember we had a MOU with Paraná, Brazil as well. And that unfortunately just was really, it took a lot of work to get up and get some legs around it and get some joint research around it, but unfortunately wasn't continued. So there's a lot to improve. Yeah.
Thank you. Matthew, you have it all. You have money, you have the support, you have the support of the New Zealand government, several ministers, from Clarence Clark to her. From time to time, you have Winston Peters saying the wrong thing, and it doesn't help. With all of that, what do you have to show for it? What do you show New Zealand has gained having it all?
Well, I don't know. We had it all for a brief moment, is what we did, because I don't think many of our current politicians are interested in Latin America, and that's not a party political thing. I can't think of any real champions there, except that we do have one Mexican MP, so he's obviously a champion, and we have one or two who have been there, but passionate advocates. So I think what we have is that the people that either our Cape or individual universities or the New Zealand government through its Prime Minister's Scholarship Scheme, who they sent to Latin America, they have experienced it. So we have a number of people who have been to Latin America and they have something to show. Beyond that, our other primary audience for the Cape was the business community. They now have knowledge that we passed on in all sorts of forms. Whether they access it is up to them, because I think New Zealand, a lot of New Zealand businesses, with one or two major exceptions, are constrained by scale, and they find it hard to have the resources to go to risky markets, unless they're already been proved by Australia. And including international education, I would say that, you know, many New Zealand universities want to see, well, is it working for Victoria and Queensland? And then we might consider it. I think with business, it will always be an uphill struggle. There'll always be niches. The people-to-people movements I've already talked about. With government, I think that what we have is one or two very influential diplomats who are doing their utmost to try and connect New Zealand and Latin America on issues of around the global commons, or free trade, or climate change, or the link between trade and climate change. So I think it is chipping away. As I said, I used the word waves before. Latin America comes and goes in New Zealand. It's flavour of the month, and then it's suddenly passé. And so we just hope that the people, and when the tide is out, there are still people chipping away, and gradually those communities will grow, will build a critical mass.
Thank you very much. Ambassador, we have GRULAC, or the absence of GRULAC. We have all the ambassadors complaining that Australia is not doing enough. But when we have GRULAC and the federal government, and we are trying to get GRULAC to work as an organization, effective organization, to convey policies, to advocate for policies that are going to accelerate this relationship, GRULAC normally is not there. There is a lot of fear about intervening probably in decisions on policies that the Australian government, I don't know, but GRULAC have to be present. What is that so?
I'll try to be short because there's so much to say about this. I believe that there is a structural problem, and it also works for New Zealand. And of course, GRULAC has to move and adapt to what is happening in the federal government or the state's government. Just starting with an example, the moment that ANU closed, the very small so-called Center for Latin American Studies, which was managed by two wonderful professors, but with no resources, no office, no nothing, and it was closed because of budgetary reasons, which was not the real reason. There was no budget. The 15 ambassadors at that time, now now they are 14. We went to see Mrs. Wong, and because of this, and to talk about in general, we were able to have one meeting with her, directly with her, and assistant secretary and others, to tell her that this is a way to show that Australia is not looking to Latin America. And well, one of the pleasures of being back in the academy is that not being now an ambassador can speak freely from a technical or academic point of view. In different words, she said, "I'm so sorry to be so honest, but Latin America," and she used this word, and it's being filmed, "Latin America is not a priority." That was really, really hard for us. And then she tried to make some exceptions. Probably she saw the expressions in our face. I said, well, we have interests in mining, renewable, some investments, and so on. But of course, it was not enough. And then we'll try to see what we can do about the Center for Latin American Studies. We wanted much more. We wanted something that can do research, exchange, and so on. But we're facing something that is structural, and there are reasons for that. I mentioned a little bit under the table when I spoke. That's delicate. What are the reasons? There is a script for Australia that probably blinds a little bit the side that looks to Latin America. But I can go into that, but it's more delicate. It has to do with geopolitics and security and so on. And this script is not being written inside Australia. But the thing is that having this structure, the whole thing has to change. And that's why I was talking about paradigms from a simple language, but it is deep. Caroline was talking about we need to send more students to Latin America. I started a program to promote the work and holiday visa for Australians, because while we had all the spaces that we have for Ecuadorians to come to Australia with the work and holiday, we hardly had 1 or 2 Australians going over there. Mm-hmm. And the question is, how do you want to send Australians to Latin America if there is no school or just an exceptions or universities that teach Spanish, the second most spoken language in the world? And that is a big question that we have to ask to ourselves. My daughter, she wanted to take one of the languages that she's been learning before. She only had 2 options, Mandarin and Indonesian, to choose in her school, which is an international school in Canberra. Because that's let's say, that's where the script take, in every possible sense, Australia. So it's not just what GRULAC can do or not, is how to face something that, I am a constructivist, has to be built among all parties. There has to be a consensus on both parties of how important it is for Australia to have this strategic alliance with these 700 million people that live just across the ocean. You don't have to cross any channel. You don't have to do anything. There is just a connectivity problem. And why? Because of lack of will, political will. So this is for a whole conference to talk. The GRULAC, unfortunately, ambassadors from GRULAC also had to respond to internal politics, and that's very bad. That has affected the processes for integration in our countries. Why? The most similar region in the world. We cannot say that you and me are not the same. Why we cannot integrate? And Europe is integrated. Unfortunately, there are some cultural and other aspects that influence that. Politics is strong, and from time to time, depending on where each government moves, then I work with GRULAC, I don't work with GRULAC. If Tatiana is in GRULAC, I don't work with GRULAC. If Telmo is in GRULAC, then I work with GRULAC. That doesn't work. And if there is not something strong like a consensus, something that is a state policy, not government policies, there will not be this possibility of really looking at each other and holding hands, not just looking, but again, it's something that needs to be built together, and with a, I would say, a very important role from Australia, but also from Latin America. I'm not blaming Australia. No, we have also been only looking to the States, to our own countries, and to Spain. So it's a whole process in which I think we are working. I think this LASA is doing that job now. And I thank for that to Margarita and the organizers. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, last but not least, Perla. Okay, from the top down, thanks to Penny Wong, Latin America is not a priority. Thanks to the white paper, Latin America is not a priority. We do know that it's not a priority. How can we make them to be a priority? We need organizations that transition, very successful organizations like Latin Stories, that transition to a role that is more political than just social. How can we do that with Latin Stories? That is so successful, but how can we do the next step?
Well, I think one of the biggest problems is that all the people leading this, we do it as a volunteer job. Everyone, Christy and Trini, have full-time jobs. They have small children. You know, this is part of their passion, our passion to do it as a side gig. But it's growing. It's growing. It's not the same Latin Stories Australia that started 10 years ago that was focused on, all right, let's communicate our stories. Now more volunteers. Now we have some people employed working as interns, or, you know, like having some paid jobs within Latin Stories Australia. It's very slow, but I think as we start growing, we can continue promoting and gaining people's confidence, you know, support, getting more grants. That is when we can start getting more people actively and perhaps fully engaged in pursuing all of this, because that's when you need to raise your hand. You need to start knocking at doors. You need to go and say to the government, I am interested. We want this. Here we are. And you need to continue raising your voice. But that requires personal and economic capacity that we are building up. So it's slow, but we are getting there. It's shown a growth in the last 10 years. And I think, and I hope we will get to the point where we can be in a position to demand certain things and say, we are a big group. And I totally agree with what Arturo said. We are Spanish speakers. We are not Ecuadorians. We're not Mexicans. We are Spanish speakers. We're Latin Americans. And we are a big force. And we should be seen. And that's what Latin Stories is trying to do. Just put us all together and say, well, we are many. We need to be acknowledged.
Thank you very much, Pat. Although the time has finished, if you want to stay 10 minutes, we can open the question to the audience, or are there any questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to say a few things. Caroline know me, and I always have questions. So the first one is, thank you, LASA. Thank you, Margarita. Thank you, Raul. It has been amazing and very encouraging. The second comment is to Caroline. I think it's the first time when I am seeing, I have been in Australia for 13 years, working on universities and helping people as much as I can to get professional jobs and to demonstrate the talent and the skills and the experience that Latin American professionals have. And it's the first time where study Melbourne and Global Victoria and all these entities are starting to look at employers and industry and Australians as a way to engage. It's not only from us and the Latin American professionals and students and international students to engage with community. It's also about educating community to engage and bring opportunities, provide opportunities to Latin American professionals. But my question is going very aligned with the last one that you did, and is how you, as leaders and very capable people that are doing a lot, are kind of supporting the young leaders from Latin America to continue building on the great work that you are doing, and perhaps utilizing non-profit organizations as Latin Stories to continue that work. Because I see many people here are doing amazing things, but how we that are really passionate for that could be connected and help support that in the long term.
More?
Really briefly, we tried to create a young professionals network. And when we realized that we were going to go, we tried to channel them into the formal Latin American New Zealand business counts. That didn't really work because they had to go from non-paid to paid, even subsidized. And that is a step which is quite a long way for young people who are starting out. And so it didn't work. We tried, I think, in some ways though, it's up to young people themselves to find ways to do things. Because I'm not young, like I think I am, but I'm not. And so I can't necessarily speak the language, have the attitudes. I'm not Latin, have the empathy. So support where you can and enable where you can. Sounds general, but that's the only answer I can really give you.
I might just add that I think that this sort of forum is really important. And so these and other sorts of meetings of different groups who are like-minded, but also aware of some of the issues that have been raised in this session around some of the problems that we face, and prepared to think innovatively, differently, outside the square, outside the box, in finding solutions to some of these things, even if it means, for example, thinking differently about impact. What does impact really mean? How are we going to measure it? They're difficult things to do. That sometimes requires a change in paradigm as well, a change in the way we think about what impact is.
Just to, at the RMIT, what we're trying to do is to get PhD students that focus on Latin America. There is an alliance that has been working with Professor Elizabeth Catt at the RMIT and Kim Prior from Alabac. And we've got one scholarship, and we are trying to get other two for next year. Then we know that it's not going to be top down, it has to be down up in order to change things. Sorry, you have one.
Yes, a question for Fairmont. I think the discussion's been primarily about how we sell Australian and Latin American relations to Australia. I was very intrigued that a fortnight ago, Mario Lubeck and the Foreign Minister or Concierge of Uruguay said our population is declining and we need to see the global Uruguayan diaspora, and the diasporas have come up a couple of times in the conversation today, as a human resource. So I'm just wondering what you think about that kind of proposition. Are there any Latin American countries that do see their diasporas as a resource?
The answer is, thank you for your question. The current president, Yamandu Orsi, established a foundation which is called Foundation 4 Million. People might be aware that Uruguay is 3.5. There are about 500,000 of us overseas, and the president called upon a number of people, including myself, to be members of that foundation on honorary basis in order to help both sides of the equation promote the relationship. We recently only signed a very good MOU on biological sciences, genetics and genomics between La Trobe University and the science park that I'm involved with, all of which is applied to food security matters and issues of the kind. But I think a lot more can be done and should be done. Can I take this opportunity to comment on the change of paradigm? I have clear recollection when Bramby, Jacinta Allen, and I had a discussion prior to 2018, when we announced first the globally connected strategy for Latin America. And we said to each other, we are not going to wait as a state for the federal government to show initiative and leadership in relation to this relationship. We took it upon ourselves, and the state government and state governments, and Queensland is doing some of it, admittedly. We said we're going to go up there and do the best we can. Therefore, we opened the office in Santiago. We try and promote universities, and now in my capacity and in my role for RMIT, I intend to follow that up and try and join forces with other universities and people in order to continue to do the same. Time constraints that we have today, but I think it's been a terrific conference in terms of food for thought in a way in which we can follow through later on after this.
Okay, we have probably to go because we have not work yet. I would like to say thank you to all our panelists and thank you for their answers and the way to contribute to this discussion. Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you all once again, LASA.
Yeah.